Hello and welcome to the Cambridge PhDcasts. Today I'm talking to Barbara Cooke, who's a PhD student in the Faculty of Criminology, and she's going to be talking to us about her research into dog training programs in prisons. So Barbara, do you want to give us a little bit of background to your research and to dog training programs themselves?
Sure. Dog training programs pair offenders with various types of dogs, which I'll get into in a second, but they started in about 1983 or so in a prison in Washington, and it was started by Sister Pauline Quinn and a local veterinarian, and they had this brilliant idea that they were going to pair the women of this facility with dogs, and they would train them to become service dogs. So along those lines, most of the dog training programs now are service dog related.
So when you say service dogs, or
yeah, I was going to say, so training dogs to be seeing eye dogs, therapy dogs, PTSD dogs, explosive detection dogs. Those are the general
kind of amazing.
Actually, I haven't gotten to visit one of the explosive detection ones, but
someday soon. That's the future of the research.
If there's one about it, yeah, I'm happy to come see it.
So this all begins in 1983-ish.
Yes.
And then what happens next?
Well, that's actually a really good question. I'm not really sure why they've taken off as they have, but they've exploded across the U.S. And there are, by my count, about 150 to 200 prisons in the U.S. that either are currently or in the past have had some sort of dog training program, whether it was a shelter dog training program or a service dog training program.
And they're not just female offenders prisons anymore, so this is now across the board?
It's now across the board. They're in adult male, adult female, and juvenile male and juvenile female facilities.
Okay, fantastic. So can you give us a bit of an idea of what these programs actually entail?
So one of the interesting and unique things about this type of program, but which also makes them a bit of a challenge to study, is that they vary drastically across the board. So generally speaking, as I said, there are two main types. There's shelter dog training programs and service dog training programs. And they have anywhere from 2 to about 100 offenders in them. So they run the gamut in size. They also run the gamut in length. So some of the programs run in very strict 8-week courses where every 8 weeks you get a new batch of dogs, you train them, they get adopted, you get another new batch, and you stay in the program for as long as you'd like, or one round, or until you're released, or
and if it's
get kicked out.
8 weeks, that's presumably not these kind of hardcore training, kind of like PTSD or explosive detection dogs. These are
Exactly. They tend to be for about more 18 months or longer. And actually some programs will have the dogs will just be until they're adopted. So they really...
Tell me a bit more about prisoners' contact with the dogs. Are they spending kind of a couple of hours a day or longer with dogs?
Again, depends on the type of program. But generally speaking, a lot of the programs seem to have the dogs actually stay in the cells with the inmates, which is pretty great particularly great for training dogs, because you have 24/7 contact with the dog, basically. Other ones, dogs might live in a kennel outside of the prison. Sometimes the dogs are brought into the prison every day or every couple days. It just really depends on the structure of the program.
And what do people see as being kind of the advantages of programs like this? And I suppose we'll get into in a while what your own research says about this, but more generally, when people kind of sell these programs, what's the shtick? What can they argue?
One of the really unique things is that actually having inmates train dogs is less expensive than having civilians train dogs. It's also many of the kinds of service dog training programs. I don't mean that in the prison sense, but in actually like organizations that train service dogs. They report that actually the dogs coming out of these prisons are actually better trained and further along the training process than they would be if they were with a civilian. So that's one end of it. The other end of it is the shelter dogs are often taken from called death row at shelters. So they're scheduled to be destroyed. So that is a nice little selling point of this is giving a dog a second chance.
Yeah, exactly. So evidently it's something that's very good for dogs themselves as well. And it's seen as having, these programs are presumably seen as having benefits for prisoners as well, the prison population.
Well, that's exactly what my research is. Yeah. So I'm looking at what those benefits are to the offenders that are in the program. And I'm specifically looking at risk and protective factors, but aside from that, anecdotally, there are lots of reports of various benefits, not only to the prisoners, to the prisons themselves, to the staff as well. So,
wide-ranging benefits, good for prisoners, good for dogs. So tell me a little bit, because these are programs that I'd heard a little bit about before we did this, and it seems that there's been certain responses from the media, but also scholarly responses as well. So what's the can you give us an overview of that, how people have responded?
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, massive media attention, particularly Oprah was really big. I think there's been several celebrities that have adopted dogs from training programs. And
once Oprah gets a hold of it, it's going to be,
Exactly. The media attention's been very positive and big, and I'm looking at that as well. Mm-hmm. But scholar-wise, there hasn't been a lot of research done on programs. Mm-hmm. You do have a handful of MPhil and PhD theses, which I'm adding to. Mm-hmm. And you do have some various journal publications, a couple of books out there. They tend to vary in what they're talking about. Some come from a veterinarian angle, some come from it from purely kind of let's get an idea of how widespread this is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it'll take little case studies of a program and literally doing a case study of that particular program. So that's kind of what's out there. Yeah.
But curiously understudied for something that has such kind of a big media footprint, and that is also obviously so widespread in American prisons as well. Let's get on to the specifics of your own projects. And can you tell us a little bit about kind of the shape of the project, but also maybe how it developed in your own mind?
I'll start with how it developed, because it's changed form, as most things do.
As all good PhD theses do.
Exactly. So I did my MPhil on the same topic here. And during my MPhil, I had been contacting various programs and interviewing and questioning program coordinators and a couple staff members, prison staff members, about their observed effects. And I realized that they'd kind of largely fallen into a handful of what we know of as being risk and protective factors for desistance versus persistence of offending. Mm-hmm. So are you going to stop? Or are you going to keep going when you get out? So I decided for the PhD, what I would do is your pretty standard issue quantitative evaluation of as many programs as I could get, but I was hoping to, massive sample size, shouldn't be a problem. Everybody was very receptive. Of course, that's not how things work out. So now I am looking at currently 5 programs in 2 states, one in an East Coast state and a Central state. And I have adult female, a few adult male, and an adult juvenile female facility that I'm looking at. And it has become a mixed methods evaluation. So I do still have my battery of surveys that are the risk factors and protective factors I'm looking at are impulsivity, empathy, self-efficacy, emotional intelligence, and criminal thinking styles. So I have that, and then I'm also interviewing and observing and adding that qualitative element now.
So let's start first of all with that quantitative side and looking at your surveys. So you pointed out 5 elements there, from impulsivity onwards. Can you give us just an idea of what each of those might mean for those of us not as familiar with the subject?
Sure, of course. So impulsivity, looking at how being in the program affects self-control. And one of the big aspects of these programs is largely if you get in trouble at all, you are out.
Yes.
And sometimes it's a completely zero tolerance situation here. So that's kind of an immediate, you can see that would be an immediate effect of you have to watch everything you do and you cannot cross any lines and you have to be on your best behavior at all times. So we also have empathy. So how does working with the dogs and working with your fellow trainers, how does that affect your empathy and emotional intelligence as well? So we know that there are very therapeutic effects of dogs on stress levels, physiological. There's an array of positive benefits from just interacting with animals.
Just from being with, yeah,
exactly. And one of them could theoretically seem to help people kind of open up, especially if you are in a very hardened environment like a prison. You kind of can really end up becoming quite. I'm not really sure what I'm looking for.
I get kind of closed down.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to express emotions. Yeah. You're not going to. Yeah, exactly.
So you would expect maybe that interacting with a dog would bring that up, and self-efficacy. So now that you're doing something very positive out there, you are learning. You have direct output to show for your hard work. So it might increase your self-efficacy, so your belief in yourself.
Yeah. And then the last one I think was criminal thinking styles.
Yeah. So do all these round up and make you less inclined to engage in a criminal lifestyle once you've left, and how does that actually change how you think about and address things.
Okay, well, so we'll get in a little bit in a sec, well, quite a lot, I imagine, into your findings and into what you can see from this kind of quantitative work. So that side of things is mainly done by administering surveys, and you were surveying inmates who are involved in these programs, but also other groups as well?
I'm also interviewing program coordinators, and I'm using that as a kind of a single term for basically people from charities, the facilities themselves, broad-ranging term of people who are actually making the program run. That's kind of what I've termed them as. And then also prison staff members.
Okay. And so you mentioned you're doing interviews as well. Can you tell us, I mean, because definitely in my own PhD research, it seems a lot more boring than this. I don't visit prisons. I don't go to these. So tell us a little bit about the interview processes, what it's like to prepare them and to carry them out.
So I opened all of the interviews kind of with a broad question of what's the best experience of the program, what are the most important benefits, what are any negative consequences of being in the program, and I kind of gauged those answers. And then I also took my battery of surveys and kind of used those types of questions to shape an interview questionnaire that would also help me kind of compare the responses from the actual surveys, and then also from the interviews to kind of compare and use them as a validation kind of thing. And then also I actually had to adapt that quite a bit. I realized that obviously it wasn't going to be appropriate for prison programs, prison staff, program coordinators, and inmates.
All need to have different.
Exactly. So I had to adapt them accordingly, and that was fine. That worked out. And
it's interesting. It's so reactive as well that you have to kind of be constantly thinking on your feet.
Exactly. It's a bit of a lot of challenges, but
I can imagine.
It's fun to address them.
Tell us a little bit. You've been working on interviews and surveys. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've found in those interviews?
So, as expected, obviously the factors that I was looking for did come up, and almost unanimously across all parties interviewed, and they were found and addressed and found to be present and affected. And I have an example that I would like to share. And this goes back to the self-efficacy. So within that construct, we also have self-confidence and self-esteem. So this is a raw transcription from an interview with an offender. And she said, "It's given me self-confidence back. It helped me find myself. I lost myself for a long time, and just, it makes me happy. It makes me real happy. So it's made me back into the person I know that I want to be." So that's an example of that transformative.
And exactly kind of what you'd been looking to find, I guess, on some level.
Exactly.
And in general, has what you found been what you expected, or have there been unexpected things coming out of this as well?
Both, actually. So I did find a lot of what I anticipated to find in the interviews particularly. But what also struck me about all these interviews is so many of these themes that were recurring throughout all of the prisons and all of the parties involved that I wasn't looking for. So a big example of that would actually be how it affects serving time, and actually even just the concept of time. And a lot of them said that it just made time fly by, and they didn't realize they weren't counting the days anymore. So that old, stereotypical marking days on the wall wasn't happening. And they often said, I've got 15 years left. Don't mind, as long as I can be in a dog training program. Or, wow, the last 2 years have just completely flown by. But particularly when they have those 8-week courses, because every 8 weeks you get a new dog, you have new goals. So that was a big recurring theme. It also affected trust. So again, being in such a hard environment, and also often coming from hard backgrounds, trust is actually usually very absent in prisons. But recurring not only within the inmates and the participants themselves, but with staff members. The staff members, I don't have to worry about this group. I can trust them, and I saw that they were often given many more tasks, and were just, you could tell they just trusted them much more. And I think it was a bit reciprocal.
So, which is really interesting to see, because it's and that wasn't exactly what you'd expected as you went in.
Exactly.
Can I ask a little bit more about how this affects kind of particular groups of prisoners? Because you said that you work with adult females, adult males, and with juveniles as well. Can you see particular patterns with particular groups?
Yes, with the younger participants, particularly the adolescents. I suspected this and saw it a bit with the interviews with them, though that interview section was a bit different. I couldn't record anything with that, so it was kind of just
note-taking.
Exactly. Yeah. We're just part of field notes. Yeah. But with when I interviewed their program coordinators and staff members, they said, this is an age in adolescence, particular. These adolescent girls are often a little bit stunted in some of their social development, just kind of not by the nature of histories of abuse they may have had coming in, whatever they'd experienced before. They're a bit stunted in ways, and that this being in the program helps them kind of work through a lot of those social skills, a lot of just kind of that emotional growth that comes with going through your teenage years, which are hard enough for anybody, let alone doing it in prison. Yeah. So that they help with that. With the men really, really talked a bit about guilt was recurring, which was also with the women, and I have a quote for coming out from in a second as well. But with the women, a lot of them were mothers, and a lot of them said, I feel like I'm still able to care for something. I haven't lost that purpose. I'm a mother, and I feel like now when I get back, not only can my kids be proud of me, I've learned a lot about, encouraging them to pursue what they want to do, and, second chances are okay, and forgiveness. A lot of women prisoners have, again, this is a recurring theme as well, histories of abuse. So a lot of them help them deal with very post-traumatic stress disorder, which, again, if they were training a PTSD dog, had a nice cathartic relatability element.
Identify on some level, which is really interesting. And obviously, with shelter dogs, do you have incidents where dogs are coming from abusive backgrounds as well? Does that help people to identify as well? It
does. And especially when they had pit bulls, for example, or fighting dogs that would come in to be rehabilitated. This is actually, some of the men spoke about this. They came from, in neighborhoods, these were status dogs. If they had a known history of engaging in dogfighting, usually you're not allowed in these programs. So it wasn't that, but they're still coming from neighborhoods where this is what these dogs represented. And now they're healing them. They're training them, they're finding new homes, and if dogs have become a completely different, or fulfill a completely different role in their lives now. So that's quite
fascinating, and kind of ways of thinking of themselves and you as well. You mentioned that you had some more material that you had from interviews. Is there some?
So recurring about all with men, women, and children, it seems helping them, giving back, that active giving back. Gesture of altruism really helped them deal with any guilt they had related to anything they'd done in the past, but also whatever their particular offense was that they were serving time for. So this is another quote from that example. So, I have a lot of guilt just with the nature of my charge, but for me it's about being able to give back and maybe somehow make up for all of my wrongs. If I just continue to sit here and do right by all of these dogs, as well as the people that have, the privilege of owning them, it's just a small part of helping me forgive myself by doing the right thing.
Maybe the obvious next question is to ask, and I know that this is a study that's been going on just for a relatively short amount of time, to answer this question fully, we need decades more, I'm sure. But to ask about things like recidivism, to ask about reoffending, is this something that you think is affecting people's behaviour after they leave prison?
There have been a few studies that have looked at it. One of the big problems with looking at a term, for example, like recidivism and also reoffending, it's very much down to the definition you're using in this particular case. So that's where it's been a bit difficult to compare a lot of the studies that have been done. But, for example, Project Pooch in Colorado.
Sorry. Name. No, these names are,
I forgot about that one when I was telling you about the names.
So just to fill people in, we have Project Pooch. We have
a lot of things with positives spelled with PAWS.
So obviously these projects can't be all good if they're engaging in punning on that level, but we will allow it, I suppose. So sorry, Project Pooch.
Project Pooch, a study done there found 0% recidivism.
Oh, wow.
Again, what is your definition, which makes things a bit difficult.
Of course.
But I am hoping to look at, to the extent that I am able to within this time, time constraints, for this particular project. I am hoping to look at reoffending rates for some of the offenders that I have. I have control groups and treatment groups for this. So I'd like to compare for what I can in the time that I can, and hopefully for a longer period following.
And this is, of course, important to mention that this is ongoing research
Exactly,
as well.
it is ongoing.
There's lots more to come, lots more exciting things to be done. Going from that, actually, let's come back right to the start. And can I just ask you how you actually get into a project like this? How you end up kind of doing a PhD on I mean, it's such a fascinating subject, but I'm really intrigued to hear how you approached it in the first place.
Sure. So I was coming to Cambridge to do my MPhil in criminology, and I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do, but I have a background in psychology. So I was coming into a kind of the criminological psychology side of things, and I ran into a family friend at a SPCA fundraiser. So I'm a dog lover. And
I'd imagine you'd have to be.
a little bit, yeah. It would be miserable if you weren't.
Yeah.
In many ways. I also wouldn't have a soul. But
Cat person myself. But we'll move on.
I love cats too.
Oh, that's allowed. Okay.
Family friend said, "Oh, criminology. Have you heard of these programs that pair, inmates with dogs?" And I was like, "What? What is this?" And came here, started looking into them, realized that not much had been done on them, and there was needed to be done, and I thought I was the right person to do it.
Yeah, well, it's such a fascinating thing to work on. So I'd like to ask a little bit, well, first of all, about that, because it's an area, as you say, doesn't have a huge amount of scholarship to it, but I mean, there's a sense that this must fit in with its concern on kind of changes in inmates and on reoffending and things like this as well. It must fit into kind of wider scholarship and wider thinking on prisons and on rehabilitation. So how does that work? How does it plug into this?
Yeah. One really interesting thing that I've come across is, again, with the varied types of implementation, the various facilities they're at have different levels of programming in existence. So one program that I went to, or prison that I went to, only has programs that would be classified as, by Hans Talk, as altruism as intervention. And so they had a food bank program, a Habitat for Humanity program, and this dog training program, and that was about it. Other places, for example, the juvenile facility that I was at, they have very rigorous programming, very catered to the offender themselves, and also just kind of because it was juvenile, they had school as well. So that seemed to really sit in amongst all those and kind of supplement in various capacities. Literally, there's different levels of engagement with all these other programs, but also beyond that, a lot of how they address various aspects of cognitive and behavioral functioning. They seem to, as I said, they supplement a lot of other types of programs as well, whether it's drug rehabilitation, or just general therapy to deal with abusive pasts and histories and other mental illnesses that might be present. So within the scholarship, in that capacity, it's difficult to say. I think that's still to be seen by research like this, but I would imagine fits in a lot of ways, though it's very unique and very different. These other types of, dealing with, when you're dealing with charities like Food Bank, for example, that's the most that's the most easy to compare to, really. Or there's a lot of equine programs out there as well. But in terms of kind of, maybe cost to prisons, that, and also what you kind of can expect to see with that active giving and similar results, those are probably the ones that they fit most closely to. If it's not a structured, rigorous set of, this is your manual for this program, this is how you implement it with, serious validity. And
Well, following this research, what do you think is the future of dog training programs in prisons?
Well, before we get to the future, I think we need to look at the current state of prisons in the US a bit.
Yeah.
And so by prisons, I do mean federal, state, local jails, and all those. I have a stat here about how many. So yeah, we have about, as of 2011, about 2.3 million adults incarcerated and about 80,000 juveniles. And the total amount, according to the Pew Trust, spent is about $52 billion. So there are corrections, and bulk of that is spent on prisons. So Obama has, called for this, it's not quite getting the payments by results that you have in the UK, but saying, we really want evidence-based programming. We want bang for their buck programs.
Yeah.
And understandably,
as well as...
understandably. Yeah. And one of the interesting things about dog training programs, which I touched on a minute ago when I was talking about cost, being low cost, is generally speaking, most of the programs are not run on state funds, or if they are, very few state funds, and largely based on donations and charities. So that right there could suggest that they could be a, cost-effective form of intervention. So, as I found, I have found, evidence that they do have a particular effect on impulsivity and empathy. So that's very good. And this is ongoing research, so we'll see what else I find when this is all wrapped up. But that does suggest that it could be a good, cost-effective form of intervention, not just for the States, but for the UK.
Okay, so to see it more broadly and to see it.
Yes. Which there isn't a program in England and Wales right now. There is one in Scotland, and they are found scattered about throughout the world. But if I do find that they do find the evidence for the evidence-based programming, then they might become more popular worldwide as well and provide a good alternative. So,
which is amazing to be embarking on research that has clear policy implications that can actually help contribute to improving lives, I guess, and improving things more generally. I think you've brought something you'd like to finish with. Would you like to maybe explain a little bit what it is and maybe?
Sure. So in addition to the interviews, I told my participants that they were more than welcome to write me anything if they'd like. And I had one participant give me this piece of writing that I thought was, not only is it quite eloquent, as you'll see in a second, but I think it sums up a lot of the impact that these programs have on a very individual level, but also as a community within a prison. As we all know, time moves forward, but what is interesting to look at is the connection between this locomotion time has and the inmate yearning we have to move forward. From childhood, we learn to crawl forward, then eventually walk forward. Actions lying in the physical realm of our psychological awareness, we not only move forward with time, but use it as a tool and set timeliness for aspirations, goals, dreams, and challenges. Unfortunately, as life tends to happen, a harsh turn of events, a bad choice, can separate us from our forward motion with time, instead to a world where we stay stagnant, waiting for time, alone to move forward. Most grow accustomed and eventually relish in their idleness, having everything taken care of for them, thus relinquishing goals that take time to achieve. With the mundane life that most prison jobs offer, who can blame them for waiting on time to move itself, without them, till the moment of freedom and life begins again? But this program, as I see it, and as it has done for me, offers a calling to displace the idle life of prison and render an outcome that can only be obtained by once again working with people and time, moving forward and achieving a goal. With that said, there is still a distinct line between an inmate and a canine caretaker, handler, or trainer. You see men where suddenly their backward-looking emptiness has changed its direction and its essence. Now they work together, and now they look ahead.
It's amazingly eloquent testimony. Well, listen, Barbara, thank you so much for bringing this to us and introducing us to such a fascinating subject.
Thank you for having me.
It's been really wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to this Cambridge PhDcast, presented by me, John Gallagher, and produced by Richard Blakemore and Ruth Rushworth, and produced in association with CRASSH. If you'd like to hear more from us and for our fantastic collection of PhDcasters, please visit the CRASSH website at CRASSH, that's with 2 S's, .cam.ac.uk. Thank you for listening.